In 1982, Argentina launched an invasion of the Falkland Islands, an archipelago over 300 miles off their coast, under the control of Britain. After initial success, British reinforcements arrived and defeated the Argentinians in a brief campaign. However, this isn't the first time that the two had gone to war. In 1806, Europe was in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars. Spain was a French ally, and Britain was their enemy. The British ruled the waves, but they didn't have the strength to launch a successful invasion of Europe. However, Spain had many colonies in South America that were relatively lightly defended. The British set their sights on the viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata in what is now Argentina and Uruguay. They prepared to invade the colony, emboldened by their victory in the Battle of Trafalgar. The first invasion was launched by Commodore Sir Home Riggs Popham, but it was technically unsanctioned by Prime Minister William Pitt. On the 27th of June, 1806, the British occupied Buenos Aires under the command of General William Carr Beresford. The Spanish garrison had been removed and sent to Montevideo to protect Spanish settlements from natives. The viceroy, Rafael de Sebramonte, fled, deeply damaging the prestige of Spain among the Argentinians. Santiago de Liniers, a French-born military officer in Spanish service, raised an army of Creoles and retook the city, with Beresford surrendering on August 14th. This earned him a promotion to viceroy, and he was made the first Count of Buenos Aires. Months later, the British returned under the commands of Admiral Sir Charles Stirling and led by General Sir Samuel Auchmuty, and took Montevideo in February 1807. The city was used as a staging ground for the second invasion of Buenos Aires under General John Whitelock. He was able to temporarily hold some neighborhoods, but de Liniers' local militia was able to win again after fierce guerrilla fighting. These victories became foundational to Argentina's burgeoning national identity and emboldened local Creoles. They began to see themselves not as colonial subjects of a European power, but as an independent nation with its own history and destiny. However, what if the second invasion of Buenos Aires had ended differently? What if the British had been able to crush de Liniers' forces and held on to Argentina indefinitely? Events in Europe would remain the same. Napoleon would be finally ousted for good in 1815, and at Vienna, the great powers would acknowledge British control of Argentina against the protestations of Spain. This British colony would include modern-day northern Argentina and Uruguay. With its vast fertile land and temperate climate, Argentina would still be a very attractive destination for European immigrants, aided by the open policies championed by early Argentinian Creole politicians like Domingo Sarmiento and Juan Alberti. As he said, to govern is to populate. They felt that a big part of nation building was encouraging population growth, both through an open immigration policy that incentivized Europeans to settle it, and family formation. Immigrants would flood in from Greece, Russia, France, Prussia, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. They'd receive much more immigration from the United Kingdom than they did in our timeline, encouraged by the British government. However, the largest influx of immigrants would still come from Spain and Italy. Argentina wasn't as densely populated as Brazil or Mexico, but it had a relatively large population of Creoles, and a Catholic Latin country would be more appealing to them. Immigrants would enter the country through Buenos Aires, but as the city grew, people would leave it to settle the interior. The native Argentinians and unruly gauchos, the cowboys of the Southern Cone, would be driven to the frontiers as settlers flooded the country and built it up. These frontiersmen would form semi-independent governments, loosely under the control of Buenos Aires. However, eventually, they would be crushed by the British. With Uruguay having been absorbed by Britain, there would be no conflict for the Brazilians and the Paraguayans to intervene in. Francisco Solano Lopez would live to an old age, and Paraguay would avoid getting crushed by Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay in the War of the Triple Alliance. Argentina would be deeply integrated into the British economy. It would be the primary source of agricultural goods for Britain, and would see the development of a light and, to a lesser extent, heavy industrial base. British plutocrats would invest heavily in Argentinian infrastructure, particularly in their railroads and telegraph lines, creating a greater sense of unity across the region, with the encouragement of men like General Julio Roca. In our timeline, the Argentinians looked to the urban renewal program of Baron Haussmann under Napoleon III in Paris for inspiration in developing Buenos Aires. British Argentina would instead look to London and lose out on the wide avenues and sweeping majestic boulevards that became characteristic of both Paris and Buenos Aires. By 1914, the majority of Argentina's population would be immigrants, mostly from Europe, and the Argentine would be one of the wealthiest places in the world, along with the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. When the Great War begins, Argentina would be roped in along with Britain's other colonies. Language differences would create some problems for coordination between Argentina and other members of the empire, but would be eased somewhat by English's status as a secondary language. By this point, most Argentinians would have a passing familiarity with it. Demand for industrial goods would help Argentina expand its industrial base. Along with agricultural goods, they'd start producing shells, propellants, brass casings, and fuses. Over 500,000 men would see combat on the Western Front, and over 1 million would serve altogether. Argentinians would begin to see themselves not just as a part of the British Empire, but as a nation under the British umbrella. As a reward for their contribution to the war effort, the Argentinians would be invited to the Versailles Conference. This would be the first time Argentina would be recognized as an independent state separate from Britain. Along with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Newfoundland, Argentina would be a British dominion. With India, they would all be signatories to the Versailles Treaty and founding members of the League of Nations. With the rise of both communism and fascism in Europe, Argentina would firmly be planted in the liberal camp. When Germany invaded Poland, Argentina would join Britain and France in their war. The Argentine Navy would participate in the Battle of the Atlantic as an auxiliary of the Royal Navy. Argentina would again provide war materials for the Allies, including tanks, guns, trucks, and aircraft. Their soldiers would fight for the Allies in North Africa, Italy, and would join America, Britain, and Canada on D-Day. They would join the United Nations, and while it wouldn't be a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it would be a major non-NATO ally. Argentina would have profited from the world wars by moving away from their over-reliance on exporting agricultural goods. They would have come out of World War II industrialized like Canada. With a more diversified economy, Argentina would have handled the decline of Britain well and pivoted into America's orbit. This Argentina would have a history of stable governments and would be less likely to see military coups. By the 21st century, Argentina would be a regional power capable of contending with Brazil as an equal, industrialized, wealthy, and populous. It would be governed by a prime minister, with the Queen as head of state. Spanish would be the official language, with English as an unofficial, recognized secondary one. Because of its wealth and stability, it would be an even bigger magnet for illegal immigration than in our timeline. The issue would be a hotly debated one, with conservative politicians calling for border control and law and order. Liberal politicians, on the other hand, would argue that Argentina is a nation of immigrants and should be more welcoming of economic migrants. Argentina would have a more active foreign policy, mostly in support of the United States, and may even see deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan. Relations with Britain would be good, and the Falklands would have been peacefully integrated into the Dominion of Argentina. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Have a nice day.